This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the April 21st, 2017 edition of the DRF Players Podcast, show 231. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you. Usually I do this show from the Brooklyn bunker. Today we're doing the show in a little bit nicer of a location than the Brooklyn bunker or the DRF offices in New York or Planet, Texas. Today we're doing the show live from Coolmore, America's Ashford stud in beautiful Lexington, Kentucky. Joined today not only by my usual co-host, Jonathan Kinchin. How are you today, JK?
How am I? How can I be any better, right? There's going to be a Pharaoh viewing, I think, coming up in the next hour and a half. A little Uncle Mo sprinkled in there. Can't get any better than this.
Before we get to the normal DRF Players Podcast, you recognize that we do have a very special guest today, our benefactor on this lovely morning here in Lexington. He's Scott Calder, and he is Coolmore America's Director of Marketing. Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you. It's great to have you guys out here.
Well, thanks so much for having us. Bunch of things I want to talk to you about. I know you got a busy day, so we're just going to dive right in. First of all, what does a director of marketing at a major stud farm breeding operation do? What is the job?
So we have a stallion roster of 15 stallions, and basically the emphasis of my job is trying to attract people to breed their mares to our stallions. So we obviously follow what's happening on the track with them very closely, and work closely with breeders around town and try and spread the good word. When anything good happens on the track and what's going on with horses, especially when they have younger progeny at the sales and that kind of thing. So just running ads, and you'll see our ads in the DRF, I'm sure, from time to time, and trying to attract people to breed to our horses, which the likes of American Pharaoh is, kind of an easier task than some of the other horses. But that's kind of the main crux of my job.
How much of your job is office bound as opposed to being able to do any hands-on work with the horses themselves?
I still do. I start the morning during the breeding season in the breeding shed every morning, so I still get to do a little bit of hands-on stuff. That's kind of maybe not typical for everybody, but I guess one of the things here at Coolmore is most people, regardless if they're in the office now, kind of started off hands-on on the farm, and it's nice to kind of keep a hand in and get out of the office, not so much in December or January, February when it's freezing, but come springtime, it's nice to get outside for a little bit.
With all the 2-year-old races that they're running over at Keeneland, the 4.5, what stallions are you excited about getting going? 2-year-olds that are going to be, first-time 2-year-olds this year that you guys are standing on the farm.
So, we've got 2 horses with first-season 2-year-olds. Shanghai Bobby, which he had his first runner the other day, which didn't work out so well, unfortunately, but it's probably fair to say of all the first-year stallions, he has a huge amount of expectation around him, following on from being such a good 2-year-old himself, but also they created a bit of a buzz at the sales last year as yearlings. And the other horse is Declaration of War, who's a bit unique in that he stood his first year over in Ireland, so he has a lot of his first crop based out of Europe, and we'll be having a lot of runners over there. So those are the 2 we'll be watching very closely over the coming months, that's for sure.
What goes into the decisions of how to place a stallion's runners in the first year? Obviously, the ones that you guys are participating in. How much? I think of the term marketing, and I think of what goes on the racetrack, and I'm imagining there's a bit of an intersection between those two things. Without getting into too many specifics, I'm just curious what the general thought process is of how you market a first year stallion.
At this stage, we're just holding our breath and waiting for some good things to happen. And, obviously when they have winners, getting that out there. The reality is that we're already partway through the breeding season. So a lot of the decisions have been made breeding wise. So for the likes of Shanghai Bobby and Declaration of War, we're actually probably more, promoting how well their horses sold last year, who bought them, are they going to be in, stable with Todd Pletcher, Bob Baffett, those kind of guys. Declaration of War has about half a dozen in Aidan O'Brien stable over in Ballydoyle. So you're pushing that kind of stuff. And also we have the 2-year-old sales season here, which is usually a, indicator if there might be a few special horses around. So a lot of that's been done, and now we sit back and just hope for the best that they come out running.
Breed the best to the best and hope for the best. Where have I heard that before?
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about your background, Scott. I think a lot of people listening are potentially interested in getting involved in horse racing. How did you make it from your native New Zealand to beautiful Lexington, Kentucky?
I suppose not unlike a lot of people in the business. My dad's in the horse business back home, so I kind of grew up around it and got I was always really into the breeding side of things, went to the sales, went racing a lot. But truthfully, never really planned to work full time. I went and did a business degree at university and always kind of saw myself going down that career path. And then if I was lucky enough to do well, getting into the breeding business on the side. And so with that in mind, I got a job on a farm in my holidays and started working hands-on, and kind of came to realize how badly I had the horse bug, and got close to graduation time and doing economics. No disrespect to all the economists out there, but that didn't really sound as exciting as maybe going down the horse path. So I decided to pursue that angle, and was lucky enough to get accepted onto a program called the Godolphin Flying Start, which is a 2-year management trainee program run through Godolphin, and that was a great way to travel around the world. And from there, I was lucky enough to get a job with Coolmore, where I've been, I think, for 5.5 years, and 4 of those years here in Kentucky.
I know a lot of successful people in the industry have gotten their start through that program. It's sort of like the high-class version of the Saratoga Special, the newspaper in Saratoga that produced me and so many others. I'm tongue firmly in cheek, of course. Your training, nothing against the Saratoga Special, but your training must have been a little more intense, traveling around the world. Which aspect of the business do you learn about in that program, or is it everything?
It's actually going back a step. Funny enough, my fiance was in the same Saratoga Special program as you, so I can't obviously badmouth that experience. But yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. You start off in Ireland and you spend time in America, here in Kentucky, Australia, Dubai, and England, and it's a very comprehensive thing. You do time, on the farm, and also you get a chance to do some placements with different people. So I was lucky enough as part of that to spend some time with Peter Snowden down in Australia, who's an amazing person and a great trainer. And, I've always been more of a focused on the breeding side, but that was a great insight into the racing stable. And I think regardless of whatever you do in the business, at the end of the day, it all comes down to what happens on the track. So I think whether you do that day in or day out, you need to have an appreciation for what makes a good racehorse and how they succeed on the track.
Scott, a lot of our listeners obviously are looking for some ways to get some winners or to cash some tickets, and I've been fortunate enough to sit with you a few times, and looking through the PPs, I always find it funny how people in your side of the industry refer to these horses by their pedigrees. Oh, that's that Shanghai Bobby, or that's that so-and-so mare, blah, 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 and we remember them by who knocked us out of pick 4s and pick 5s. But what are some of the kind of the things you look at when you look down at the PPs? I know we look at different things, but what are some of the things that catch your attention? What are some of the tricks that you could kind of, or some angles that you look for that you could kind of pass along to some of the listeners?
I'm probably going to give you a pretty bad answer for this, but yeah, as you say, I think first and foremost, I always look through the pedigrees, but I often have to talk myself out of bad biases towards certain horses, because obviously it's a competitive business. So I'm looking at stallions at opposing farms or stallions that I don't think are maybe particularly good, and trying to tell myself that just because I don't like that stallion or he isn't a good stallion in general doesn't mean the horse has a chance in that race. But so I guess there are some clues in terms of horses trying things for the first time that you might have a little bit of an insight to. And certainly I think having worked here with Uncle Mo, I think a lot of people probably questioned his ability to get classic type horses. I know that was a big conversation when Nyquist was leading up to the Derby, but having seen him physically and known a little bit more about the stock that he produced, we were always kind of confident that they may even though he was such a good 2-year-old, that they may even be better as 3-year-olds, and those kind of big classic races were within their scope. So there's things like that, but I don't know, I might throw it back to you guys. As I said, when a horse is trying something new, I think maybe it can give you some clues, but would you agree that once a horse runs and does something, that the form on the page is kind of a better indicator at that point?
I think that's fair to say that for most horse players, if the horse is, again, if there's not a major change involved in what the horse is doing that day, form will tend to supersede paper. But then form will tend to supersede breeding. But at the same time, I think since so many horse players think that way, when there's times you could maybe pull in some extra level of breeding knowledge, something about the female family or the dam, and the horse is making a change from a glib Southern California fast racing surface to a deep, more tiring Midwestern racing surface. Maybe there's some things you could pull out from the breeding side that could continue to inform your handicapping even after there's a little bit of paper in play. What do you think, Jonathan?
No, absolutely. I think that, we, like you said, we form opinions, but the paper doesn't really lie. You can have these opinions of how you think something's going to happen. Scott's probably referring to me, not directly, but I was one of those people that, for whatever reason, I just thought Uncle Mo was this sprinty type, early, precocious horse. And my opinion of that changed when Nyquist started winning derbies, and when I saw how massive he was. When we were here the first time, we saw all these different horses, and we got to Uncle Mo, and I was like, "Who's that?" And they're like, "Uncle Mo." I was like, "These guys work here every day, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. It must be a different horse." And because he's massive, and I had no idea that he was that big. And so I think that what happens on paper can definitely change that. The ability of a sire to get a turf horse, when they start getting them, you better change and adjust to that.
Yeah, and I think for me, the more so than the pages, I love to get down to the paddock and look at horses. And I think one thing from being on the farm, A, the kind of condition a horse is in, but B, there are certain physical types of horses that lend themselves to different, whether it's turf or it's short or it's long. So for me, that's probably the one thing I like to do. And I don't follow the racing as closely as you guys. So maybe I'm just being lazy, and I think that's a way I can go and spend 10 minutes in the paddock and maybe get a little bit of extra info. But I think that's always something that shouldn't be underestimated.
That's a great point, Scott. And I think in this age of computer bettors who don't know which end of a horse is which, possibly literally, the ability to go and look at horses is a way to get an edge that other people don't have. I don't think it's lazy at all. I think it's you talked about your economics background. I mean, I would assume as an economist that idea resonates with you. You're looking at information that only controls a small percent of the overall marketplace, but can very often be the difference between winning and losing. If a horse looks on paper like they're going to be great, and you know what this horse looks like every time, and you go to the paddock and he's not having a good day, that's the kind of information that I would imagine sometimes can make the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me ask you one more question, Scott, but then I know you've got to run and have other important work today. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day. I did want to talk to you about that idea of when you're using breeding in your handicapping and horse playing, how important for you is the female family versus the sire line?
Oh, it's hugely important. And I think we're definitely guilty of that in the stud business. So much emphasis is put on the males. And, that's for obvious reasons that, a mare has one foal every year and a stallion can have, 150, and you're much more familiar. And we talk about the stallions all the time and all this emphasis on what the stallion's done, but the female part of it is often overlooked. And the thing that's tricky too, and you see it with certain stallions as well. When you start seeing the kind of stock they're throwing, often a lot of times the broodmare sire or the broodmare will really come through in a stallion. I think probably Verrazano, who we stand here, is probably going to be maybe an example of that. So there are so many elements that to take into account, and I think maybe like humans do for simplicity, you kind of stick to the simple parts of it. But yeah, I think probably often if you think a horse is going to do something maybe out of the ordinary for a stallion, the female pedigree is so important, and often it's not just the direct descendants, but even the influence of some of the ancestors further back in the pedigree seem to shine through.
This is great, Scott. We could easily keep you the whole hour, but I know you got stuff to do. We'll let you jet, and we'll continue to talk about some of these issues of breeding and horse playing, and we hope you'll come back on the show again soon, and we'll see you in about 45 or 50 minutes down there at the barns.
No, absolutely. And I must say it's great to have you guys out here, and I think, unfortunately, there can be a kind of disconnect in our business between what certain parts of the bloodstock business see as priorities, and I think sometimes the horse players get overlooked in what's important for them and how important they are to making the whole business go around. So I think it's great what you guys do, and I think the handicapping tournaments are a great thing that seem to be growing and growing. So yeah, it's been great to have you guys out here, and thank you for taking the time to come by and see us.
Cheers, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, Jonathan, that was fun. One idea that popped in my head while Scott was talking, getting back to the statistics, he makes a great point about a big part of the emphasis. The reason a lot of horse players, it's all about the stallion, or some PPs even, you'll see stats not about the dam, but about the dam sire. And it has to do with how much data there is when it comes to sires. 150 a year, you can get some percentages. We talk about sample size. You get a huge sample size on the sire side. On the dam side, it might be a first foal. The sample is so much smaller. And I think that leads some horse players to just sort of throw that out and be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter because, you can't statistically prove anything about the dam side because a dam can only have one foal a year. But I think the horse player who can really do the extra work and look into those pedigrees, yeah, you're not going to have the sample size to make any statistical declarations of fact, but sometimes being able to interpret a small amount of data correctly and maybe identify a mare who is a real producer, that could be just as valuable. It's almost like in baseball, you can have a whole season's worth of stats versus the guy who was 7 for 8 in the last week. Which one is more important? And you have to decide that for yourself. We have a very special guest just walked in here for the podcast. I don't know if we can get him mic'd up. Maybe go sit next to Jonathan and see if we can hear an unexpected visitor in the form of the champ himself, Paul Matties. Paul Matties joining us. Paul, what's going on?
What's going on, Pete? Former champ. I'm not the current champ. I think the current champ is going to be in Lexington too today, I think.
Talking, of course, about Ray Arsenault. Maybe, Jonathan, we'll put you on muting duty when I'm talking. Does that work? Excellent. So, Paul, what brings you to this beautiful farm here, Coolmore, America's Ashford stud?
An ironic twist. When Jonathan said you guys were having a podcast out here, I got a call about an hour after that yesterday. I have a mare that's been booked a declaration of war, and she hasn't caught. And she's supposed to be coming today. So I was checking on that as well as seeing my two buddies.
I love it. I was just doing this whole theoretical exploration in my head based on some of the great stuff Scott Calder was talking about. I'll ask you, as a numbers-oriented guy, when you're thinking about the breeding portion of the business, so many people in the business are so focused on the sire with the sample size of sire statistics being so much greater than the dam side. But I'm very interested in the value that a knowledge of the female side of pedigrees might be able to present. You can't make the same kind of factual statistical declarations, but how important is the female side of the pedigree to you when you're doing your handicapping?
Well, Very much so. Even more so at handicapping than sires. But when it comes to breeding, it's two things. It's either you're breeding to be sold or breeding to be raced, and that's a big difference, you know. So I'm just starting to get into. I have a mare that's kind of fashionable that I could actually sell the offspring. So I'm kind of being forced more into that business that I don't know at all. Everything I've ever done in the past is breeding to race, and when you have that, you don't have any of these stigmas of the industry on you. And then it's all mares, I think, or in all crosses. You know, you can be a lot more, a lot more creative and try to do some crazy things. And then I think, and those things, your knowledge of racing, of how the mare raced, and how the sire raced, and then there's a lot of theories out there on breeding, but definitely inbreeding is definitely a thing that produces speed. So it's how you come about that, and I guess that's the art or science of it. But I guess there isn't a science to it. It's just kind of, you just kind of hope.
Hope, that word comes up an awful lot when we're talking about the breeding business. As a horse player, a lot of people listening are wondering what knowledge, how they can translate all the information out there about the breeding business and their knowledge of the breeding business into the specifics of their horse playing. One question, you mentioned the difference between breeding to race and breeding to sell. So I want to talk to you about this topic a little bit, but the first question I'll ask is just very specific. As a handicapper, when you're going through and looking at a maiden race, do you have any prejudices when it comes to homebreds versus horses who went through the sales ring? Do you prefer homebreds to horses that went through the ring, or does it just totally depend?
Well, anybody who's listening to this podcast, you probably can't see it, right? There's no. This is the greatest setup ever. You should see this table. It's like Pete is a mile away from Jonathan and myself, so it's great. Well, handicapping. I think the one thing about the homebreds, they seem to be. It takes more time in general terms. More time. People will take more time with them, as they develop. So they're not so hell-bent to get their money back or to win right off the bat. So probably if you're just looking at it as a straight statistic thing, the horses in the sales probably win at a higher rate, But I think it's probably just the nature of it that they just have to. And that's why the horses that are in the sales get those type of trainers, So it's kind of just the whole chart just flows, But I'm more probably into the homebred and watching them develop, and because that's where you can get more prices and more different things of form and the things that I prefer to do with come about. Some of the greatest bets you can make is when a hidden improvement in I don't have to tell you two guys, but a hidden improvement of a young horse, and when it's a homebred, it seems to be more apparent that will happen. And you can see it coming easier.
I like that concept very much, and it makes sense. The whole business model is a different deal. And if you've bred this horse to be your racehorse, the idea that you could have a lot more patience and bring them along slowly as opposed to recouping an investment. What are some of the other things you look for in maiden races in general, when you don't have, obviously you're an accomplished figure maker, when you don't have figures and you're just looking at trainer angles and bloodlines, what are some of the things that help push you in a direction to make a decision about who you're going to bet in a certain race?
Well, one of the things I do, you were talking about earlier, the sire or the mare. We do keep a little bit of record on all the mares and, how they did with their 2-year-olds and their early 3-year-olds and their success there. And I'm a big AWD guy, average win distance. And it seems like, the horses that have the mares that have the higher AWDs don't really produce the horses to win right off the bat. Like I said, though, I'm more into that angle. I'm not a guy who, even though I know one of my good friends and one of Jonathan's good friends, John the Clocker there, John Nichols, we know him and we respect his opinion and stuff. I think we're more looking at how the maidens develop, how the babies develop more than, trying to get them first time. That's not, you need to know that some of that stuff for pick fours and that sort of thing, but that's not where I'm looking to make scores,
What are some of the clues that a horse is developing on paper, clues you might see in terms of the figures that a horse is developing and potentially going to be able to explode and improve? Are there any clues that are offered in terms of a pattern of final time figures or something you see in your pace figures that indicate that?
Well, pace figures for sure. I mean, that's a big one. If you have a good set of pace figures, because I'm a believer, if a horse can do something, if it can accomplish a figure at 4 furlongs, it can do it at 6. I mean, and a lot of times, if it can do it at 2 furlongs, it can do it at 6. I mean, there's some rare cases where horses have some distance limitations where they can't make it. But in general, I think like there was a horse yesterday that ran a Keeneland that had a high pace figure for a quarter of a mile. His final figure wasn't that flashy, but when I was looking at his form, I said, well, there's chances are he's going to get to the pace figure, not to the final figure the next time he races. And the pace figure was good enough to win, So that's definite. And then there's a lot of visual, too. Sometimes you just can't see it. You'll see a horse, breaks bad or doesn't know what he's doing, and then figures it out during the race. So those are things that my brother Duke is really good at. He tries to look for things like that. So it's you can go about it in different ways. But I think that's a better approach at baby races than just taking wild steps. I mean, Stephen Christ said a long time ago, the worst bet in racing is betting first-time starters. It's the worst percentage. Ironically, in these contests, Jonathan and I've talked about this, and I may have talked about with you too, Pete, that sometimes these contests are decided by a first-time starter that's not bet, which is the worst bet in the world, and the contest gets decided by it. But because there's so many of them, that's probably the luckiest thing about contests that I don't like. That I can't stand. We have jokes about that was the first. We haven't seen one of these horses win for a week. There must be a contest today because 2 or 3 of them won. But I still don't think that's the right way to approach contests, and a lot of people do. Because it's an easy way out. It's an easy way to, it's an easy way to come up with a 15-1 shot. Is to say, oh, this is a Todd Pletcher, or this trainer has got a 15-1 shot first-time starter. Well, that's a horrible bet, on the stats if you look at it. But in a contest, it's an easy way out. And I would suggest not to do that if you're third in play. And also the fact that you're going to do something that other people are doing. I just had this conversation with Frank Angst of Blood Horse. He was asking about tournaments, and I said, you still want to try to do things that other people aren't. Try to find the races that other people aren't going to be playing. If you know that everybody's going to be in this maiden turf race, even though there's probably going to be a price, well, there's going to be a bunch of other people that have that horse. That's not going to be the determinant factor in the contest. So you got to find the trickier ones in the right races to win. You might have a little success, and you might cash if you get lucky if you land on one of those right. But I don't think you're ever going to win with just that. Wouldn't you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, there's definitely a subset of contest players who are focusing on, the Wolfsons come to mind. Just immense knowledge of breeding, being in the business for so long, focusing on any type of race where there's a breeding angle to get an edge. Obviously, turf racing with all the inherent chaos, especially in USA turf racing with running 12 horses around tight turns and all the crazy things. There's some contest players who just focus on that. What's the new frontier this day and age? What is the contest race that somebody could try to focus on that everybody else isn't playing? The one idea that pops in my head is it worth trying to focus on short fields or something that most contest players just want to run the other way from? Where would you suggest people mine in contests these days?
And that's the rub, that's the hard part, trying to stay up on, being ahead of everybody else. We were talking and, you could use these tournaments before, you could do good just by picking the 10-1s. And now it's, Everybody's doing that. So I don't know exactly. I think that's the great thing about racing. It's different every day. But I like that trick. I like the short field contest horses. I've never said that publicly, but I like that one, especially if even if the second, third, even if you're not even against the favorite, but if you're against the second and third favorites, I like taking a bomb in a short field because something crazy happens to the favorite, and now you got a winner, and now with this common pool pricing, you might get an okay place price even if the favorite does win. So and it's not like a total. I've never talked to Jonathan about this, but giving away contest picks, I think, is a thing that you try to avoid. Because so many times you get in the contest and you're just giving one away. All right, he's got a chance at 20-1, and I think that management of not giving away the picks is a big deal in contests. I mean, that's what I think. One thing that I've never really discussed with anybody, but I think that's an important thing, especially in the bigger contests. Like the World Series where it's 3 days of 36. And everybody's just firing away, or even the NHC. I've seen people just get lost in that NHC where our buddy James Henry there, he'll give up after he misses 4 or 5 of them, and I think, and he's a great handicapper, but it can get on you, mentally by just giving away picks, so. By taking some of those short fields, I think that it eases on your psyche even,
My great friend the late Jeff Sotman, contest impresario, a phrase that he told me long ago that made its way into the winning contest player: short field, long price. That was one of his angles in the early days, and I haven't really heard too many people glom onto that concept. Maybe there is something there. And I like that idea also of treating those bullets almost as if they were. Thinking about the bullets, sort of the reverse of what you hear about playing in live bankroll like it's funny money. Maybe there's some angle in playing in a mythical money contest, but treating the bullets a little more precious, a little more like they were money, because that's sort of, those are your only chances to get there. Is that sort of? I think it's a big part of contest.
Just like the example of World Series. And I've been trying to talk to them about switching this format, but on Thursday, they want 15 picks, and there's 3 tracks running. And on Saturday, when everybody's running 15 races, there's still 15 picks. So the bullet on Thursday is a different bullet than the bullet on Saturday. And Duke and I talk about that all the time. And all right, what are we shooting for? Like the table will come in and say, well, 3-1s are good today. Because everybody's handicapped and said, you're not going to get 20-1 shots, and you're not even going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time coming up with 15, 10 to 21 shots that you're going to pick. It's almost impossible. So that value of the bullet is a big thing in tournaments, And I think some people do it instinctively, but I think that's a major factor, and I think that's a big factor in the NHC, and I think that's why I like the format when it changed. And I talked about it because I think the bullet's value change as the tournaments go, as the NHC moves.
And that's a great point. And that's actually, I was going to ask you about that anyway. Our minds are moving on parallel lines. How does having a cut line, like in the NHC format that's emerged, change the way you play over the Horse Player World Series, where there are no cut lines, everybody's in it for 3 days? How does it change your approach to know that if you don't get in the top 10%, you're not able to advance?
I have this talk to everybody at the World Series once they start doing good. I said, you got to take shots to win now, which is kind of different than the NHC, because once you get in it in contention, you should be looking to, and the World Series, you should just shoot for the moon once you get close. Because if you get that 40-1 shot, or because you even get a little extra in that one, that's the difference of winning. And all the value in that contest is on top. So you want to win it. But then everybody gets scared once they get around the top 10 or in the top 20, and they say, "Oh, I got to stay in the top." No, this is your day. You got to go for it at that point. Don't chicken out now. This is your attempt. And I when the guys that are my friends are close and they're talking about taking a 5-1 shot when they're in 12, and everybody laughs at me because no way. I rip up their seat and I say, "You got to go for it. You got to take a shot." Now the NHC is different because once you get in front in the NHC, then it almost changes. You got to start picking just winners. You got to get points because you got to stay ahead of everybody, and all the races. So it's a completely different animal, the two different contests, and I just when you get in that kind of contest where the winning is everything, you gotta don't forget that that's what you gotta go for. And it's no different than these online contests when it's if there's one or two people that make it. When you get to that last stop, that nobody has any problem with, because you're not cashing if you're 10th or something, so everybody is firing in those contests, but they won't do it when they're actually in the big one, when they get to when they make their big chance. So.
As a player, which format do you prefer? I mean, maybe I'll ask it this way. What's a better test of you as a horse player, the wide open format or the format that has cut lines?
Well, the one thing about the World Series that works is because it's 3 days and there's so many of them. So I don't, in general, like those. I think that's there's more where it's just contests in those tournaments, but. That's why I like the NHC, because it's different. You got to be on your feet, of doing different things in handicapping. But because the World Series is 3 days, it works. It just weeds you out over time. So it's the format is enough. There's enough there, to make it, to overcome maybe the flaws of it,
That definitely makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about the Keeneland contest, and then we'll close out the show today. We got a couple quick questions to deal with, and we should talk about some races at some point. I don't know, Paul, if you want to stick around for that part or give it back to Jonathan for the racing discussion. But no, it's any time. It was such a pleasure to have you on, and we always like surprises on the show. We've had a few of them lately. But let me ask you this about the Keeneland contest. I assume you down here. Did you come down here to be at Ashford Stud today, or are you in town for the contest?
This is another ironic thing that I can't stay for the contest on Sunday because my wife is coming back from Europe and I have to pick them up from the airport. So unfortunately, I can't stay on Sunday. So I just came with my son down to see Keeneland because I was in South Carolina for the ARCI meetings, and it was only an 8 or 9 hour drive to Keeneland. So I said, how can we turn that down? So we've been over here since.
Any opportunity to come and check out this place?
Everybody's here. All my friends, and I've seen a bunch of people here that were here yesterday already, and they're funneling in for the contest.
Well, we'll certainly miss you for the contest. It's gonna be fun. Definitely.
I'd love to be in it. I was talking to Jim Goodman, who runs it, and I was getting upset. The more I talked to him, the more upset I wasn't staying for Sunday.
Life gets in the way. We know how that. We definitely know how that goes. Oh, you know what? One of these questions is so perfect for you, Paul. We're going to keep you for another minute if you don't mind. This one came from my old buddy, the Ice Cream Man, who appears on the show from time to time in various formats. And he read Craig Milkowski's little article about the pace projector that he did for the Kentucky Derby. And the question was about Always Dreaming. Craig just had like a throwaway line in there, and we'll be talking to him about this more as we get closer to the Derby. Craig and I are going to be doing a handicapping session for the Derby the week of, and I'll certainly ask him this. But he was talking about Always Dreaming's pace figures, and I thought the implication of his line, he said something like Always Dreaming has never seen early pace figures like the one he's going to encounter in the Derby. I thought he was hinting at the idea that Always Dreaming might be a vulnerable favorite because of this lack of early pace figures. And my friend had made the point about the excellent late pace figures that Always Dreaming had run to date, and said, hey, maybe it's not a negative. Maybe he'll just employ a different running style in the Derby, and with the finish he's shown, he'll be fine. So I guess the question is, does it give you pause to see a horse like Always Dreaming, who's run these modest early pace figures, excellent late pace figures, but been close to the front in a race like the Derby where the dynamics are going to be totally different? How do you see this horse from a pace point of view?
No, I from what you're saying, I didn't read Craig's article, but I'm saying he's right. From the any horses that stalk slow paces with slow figures, I'm against. Those are the horses you want to bet against. And Always Dreaming has not run fast enough early. He's gonna be in a different universe in the Derby than what. And one of the things is the Derby is a special race, so you get to go back and you know what it takes to go, in pace figures. And Always Dreaming doesn't have it on my figures. He does not have the figures that have won the Derby in the past, especially with speed horses that have won. I mean, he's not Smarty Jones. Those aren't Smarty Jones' numbers. They're not American Pharoah numbers that Always Dreaming has. And even American Pharoah had a slow pace going into the Derby, but he had other races in the prior that were, any horse that's fast late with an ideal setup of being by himself, like stalking a slow pace or being loose, those are the horses you want to bet against.
All right, that's an excellent answer. Thank you for chiming in on that. We also had a question. I'm going to ask you this one as well. We have all these figure questions today. This question was about the speed figure for the Sunland Derby. Somebody asked me why the figure was raised. I guess Bayer raised it from its initial 94 or 95 up to around 100. And I had explained that the reason that happened is because of the performance of horses coming out of the race. E-Rap going on to win the Bluegrass right here in Lexington. Conquest Mo Money running such a big race in the Arkansas Derby. So that's why that happens. I guess my question for you, Paul, and you worked on the Bayer team, so you probably have an opinion on this. What do you think about that general concept of raising a figure after the fact?
I'm okay with it. Most people don't like it, but I think it's better if you. I think you want the correct figures, even if they're 5 races ago. I mean, I've seen criticism of people saying that you shouldn't. Once it's run, it's run. I don't understand that because. Why do you want a wrong figure in there forever? I mean, not in this case, but there's other cases where the time is actually wrong. And sometimes you don't realize it right away because one thing I hate doing is making fast races slower. When figure makers who project races that are come up fast and then immediately make them slower, I think is a big mistake because we're looking for the fast races. Let's prove that race wasn't fast before we put it down. And I think there's a trend now that most people don't like doing that. It's like an embarrassment if you make a race too fast that turns out not being fast. Well, all right, so you got one wrong, but the ones that are fast that you made scores out of, over and over again, they're way better. You make more money out of the ones you make more money out of the ones that you're right about than the ones you lose money on you're wrong about. So, but I like getting them right. As far as the Sunland Derby race, I know why that mile and an eighth Sunland Derby, the Sunland Park is a tricky track when it comes to the mile and 16th and a mile and an eighth, and there's so little data on them that Andy or Mark probably didn't, or even I don't know if it was Nick. They probably didn't have enough to go with to make it. Sometimes a little bit, but and I don't think I changed it. I think it was on that right from the get-go. But it was fast all around. That's why I remember going with it because it was a fast pace and the other races on that day, I was confident with lining that one up. So that race didn't surprise me that it was good. Better than what everybody thought. I'm a little surprised at some of the horses that have run good out of it, because I thought that day was a dead rail and that pace was fast, and so I'm not. That's why Hence confuses me, because he obviously got a good setup in that race, but he did run fast. So he's a tricky one.
I drafted him when we did our little Triple Crown draft earlier this week, and my fear about that was for a trainer who has so many Derby hopefuls, when they send one to Sunland, actually it was our friend of the podcast, Marcus Hirsch, that made this point. When a trainer with a lot of horses sends one to Sunland, given how productive Sunland has usually been as a Kentucky Derby prep with a couple of notable exceptions, they're not sending them to Sunland because they think he's the good one, which does give me a little bit of pause. But the way the race has turned out, it's been great. Quick thought from you on the Derby in general.
However, I like the Sunland Derby prep. I've always been a fan of that prep. I loved Firing Line the year he ran, and the Mind the Bird. I don't think that meant anything, but that race is a race that I think is a good race to project how the Derby goes, because it's kind of like chaos. My brother Greg calls it scramble. He has this feeling that some horses can scramble and some of them can't, and Hens kind of proved that he can scramble, and I think that race shows that if because they go fast usually. It's a big field. It's kind of like, it's not like some of these races that you'll see at Keeneland or Gulfstream or even Aqueduct, where they just waltz for the first 6 furlongs, and then usually the best horse wins, but they don't really deal with any adversity. You win that race at Sunderland, you pretty much you dealt with a lot of the other things of racing that you're going to face in the Kentucky Derby. So that's why I don't mind that race. And even though Hens, so with it, that my brother Duke will probably not like, because he got a perfect setup in that race. I think he's got a chance in the Derby, because he's an improving horse who can handle the
Duke
chaos.
said he liked it.
He did? Yeah. Did he?
Actually, Jonathan, it turns out we can hear you fine. We could have had you talking this whole time. The mic is picking you up nicely. I feel bad you've been our producer here for the last few minutes. Any other last thoughts, Paul, on the Derby to share before we'll let you can hang out, but we'll let you relax and not have to talk, and Jonathan and I will just rip through a few of these races we were going to talk about today. But before we do that, any other particular fancies for the Derby at this stage, or do you wait till they draw?
Well, I normally wait, but especially for some reason the Derby is a race where how they work into it has become a big deal. So I do before I make a final decision. I'll probably wait. But this year I'm having trouble, which I think is a good thing in the end once you get there, because a lot of times in the Derby you can't throw any horses out. I don't think you're gonna have any problem this year throwing in. There's a lot of horses that you don't like. And I think that's a good thing. I'm a little. I wanted the Thunder Snow horse to come from the UAE Derby, because they haven't had a lot of success out of that race, but this race this year was fast. I had it only about 10 or 11 points lower than Arrogant.
Wow, that's a big difference from the Beyer team.
Yeah, they didn't see it that way, but I think, like if you go back and look at Lanny last year, the Thunder Snow race this year was faster than the last year's race, and the track was definitely slower. Arrogant had run slower than California Chrome did the year before, and I had big front figures on Gun Runner going into the World Cup, so I don't have any reason to believe that even though Arrogant had trouble, that the race wasn't 115 at the minimum, maybe just slightly slower than that. That puts the other horse in it, and more so than any other year. I think this might be the right year for something like that to happen. And I think the horse he beat was pretty good. The horse from Japan, he had been undefeated, and he ran him down. I don't think the other horse was tiring. So I thought that was an interesting. But this might be the year for something different. And then if you look at these other preps, you don't want any of those. I mean, the California horses, how can you, I know they went fast early, but it's hard to like any of them. And the Oaklawn race came up slow, though I don't think Classic Empire. I heard somebody say that Classic Empire got a perfect trip, which I disagree with.
He had trouble.
Yeah, and I thought he won without. He won without a setup. I thought. I thought he showed his determination to win. He's a tough horse to take as a favorite, though. Because you never know what he's going to do, and he hasn't had the greatest year going in. The two horses that won, Irish War Cry and Always Dreaming, stalk slow paces. They ran okay figures, but you go back in time and look at horses like that in the Derby, and they don't have a good success rate. In coming out of those races, the Wood Memorial and the Florida Derby, horses that have stalked slow paces and won, and both of them fit that category. So, this is a, IRAP is the same scenario. He stalked a slow pace in a bad speed on a day where the rail was bad and he was in the right spot of the track. I don't know. You got to be against him too. I mean, this is a This is a very difficult Derby because it's more. I've never remembered a Derby where there's so many horses to be against. And I'm going to be against all the ones we mentioned. I'm throwing them all. I'm going to throw them out of everything.
It sounds like, according to Paul Matties, none of them can win.
Well, I mean, there's going to be a tricky one in there somewhere that you're going to have to find. I think that's the key.
All right, let's throw it back to Jonathan. Paul, feel free to hang out, and then you can take our walk.
Sorry, Jonathan, I hijacked his mic.
No.
If I'd have known Paul was coming, I would have got a mimosa.
There is a bar over there in the corner, JK. I imagine in this beautiful conference room here at Coolmore America's Ashford Stud that we have we probably some slightly more important decisions have been made rather than which drink to grab from the bar in the corner. But I bet you could probably scare up a mimosa if you really tried. But no, anytime we always, there's a few people we always say they're like, this is a dated reference, but for the older listeners, it's, E.F. Hutton. When they talk, we want to listen. Paul, you're at the top of that list. So please do not apologize. We just have a few minutes left, JK. I think this is going to probably just degenerate into giving like quick selections rather than anything else. What do you want to talk about where we are though? Give people a little bit better description than what I've done.
No. I was just saying. I was doing the circle, saying let's just do Keeneland.
Yeah,
we'll talk about the Keeneland races. We can just kind of blast through it. On out of the gate this week, I did a pick 3 at Keeneland. So on Saturday. There's a horse that was interesting. I tried to bet the horse last time in race 7 on Saturday, Westfest, that moved from Baffert to Asmussen. I kind of fell in love with the horse in California last year because the horse outworked Lord Nelson when Lord Nelson was going really well. And so I kind of caught my attention. I fell in love with the horse. Didn't run well at Oaklawn last time, first time for Asmussen. But I think he's just better than these horses, and I'm going to give him another shot. I'll probably single there to start off the pick 4 in race 7 tomorrow at Keeneland.
Feels like a pace edge, too, on top of everything else for Westfest. I imagine he's going to be the fastest of these early. Even a horse like Stone adding blinkers, I don't think has the early pace necessarily to deal with him. I agree. I mean, any B's for you in there or just a stone cold A? And then let's move on to the 8th.
Yeah, in the 8th, this is more about who I'm against. I'm against Aquamarine. For switching from Baffert to Lucas. No offense to the coach, but I would consider that at least in 2017 as a negative move. So I'm against Aquamarine. Bam Bam Brian and Linstar both have their last 2 wins by 6 open lengths. I think I'd be fine with using just those 2 to get to the next race.
I like it. And the next race is the Elkhorn, the grade 2, 1.5 miles on the Keeneland turf. First off, have you looked at a forecast? What is it? Are we going to be on the turf here?
Well, I would imagine for this race they'll stay on, even if some of the other stuff comes off. I mean, it's supposed to rain. They're expecting possibly an inch. I'm no horticulturist. Did I butcher that, or did I get it right?
Horticulturist is correct, but I'm not sure it means where you're going with it.
Where I'm going, but I've heard that the Keeneland turf course drains very well.
Nice, so well done.
All right. Well done. Yeah. That was a highlight of JK's vocabulary on the DRF Players podcast. I made a joke on the out of the gate. You put me and Paul in a horse suit, let Mike Maker train us to go 10, 12 furlongs on the grass. I would bet on us as well. I'm using 4 Maker horses as A horses in my pick 5.
You are kidding me. You're using all of them?
I'm using all of them, and one of them's going to win. We'll see which one it is.
The one that I was interested in was, I guess, the obvious one, who's bigger picture. It would appear that Ortiz would have had his choice between bigger picture and Taglib. So I like the fact that Ortiz stuck around with bigger picture. It is true. Even you can, Charming Kitten. That you think the ground would be helpful. I guess if I'm interested that you're using Roman Approval though, the same level as those other Maker horses. Is that a pace angle or what? Why are you using Roman Approval the same as the apparently superior ones?
It's just the respect thing. Those horses for Maker do not stop when they're going 12 furlongs. They look like they're in trouble on the turn, and then they just fine, and they keep running, and they keep running. And the other reason I'll use him as an A is because he's going to be the one of the longest prices on the board, so the value is, I'm okay with it there in that spot. I don't feel like I'm throwing value out the window. But no, he's drawn outside. he had a good account of himself at Saratoga this summer, going long, Belmont as well. It's a little bit kind of quirky. Obviously, I'm using all the makers, but I wasn't prepared to throw that one out.
Yeah, I'm not objecting to the idea. I'm not saying you should throw out, but I was just thinking, that one looked like, for me, that one looked like more of a C, and or a B at least. I know you're not a big C guy, but anyway, I get it.
I will say this: I'm going to use the Jeff Mullins horse a little bit. French bred, soft grass. You could see an improve from running, on the West Coast on hard surfaces all the time. Maybe the horse wakes up here. Not that the horse needs to be woken up. I mean, he's in the exacta in his last 6 starts. But that's one that I think could present a little bit of value. Jeff Mullins, I don't think he gets hammered at the windows in the bluegrass.
Makes sense. Number 4, it's in the post. It's how appropriate that we're ending up with a maiden race, given so much of what we've been talking about on this show. For me, one leapt out here. Number 7, Golden Domer, adding Lasix for Brendan Walsh. I love the break from the first race. Just seemed like a horse who has the opportunity to improve. And given the way the horse was bet last time, makes you wonder if maybe this wasn't the spot they had in mind the whole time. Do you like number 7, Golden Domer, as one of your A's? And who else do you like in the 10th?
I do, but I have a feeling they're going to come for him a little bit. And the 4-1 might trick you into thinking that your day is going to be built around that situation. He's actually going to be 5-2. The horse I'd probably use in tournaments and stuff like that is the 4 Star Quest. I just think that the Oaklawn maiden races this season were all pretty tough. They're giving away $80,000 versus the $40,000 that you were getting for a maiden special weight at Gulfstream. Keeneland obviously gives about $70,000 away, but so I'm going to look for that horse coming out of that race. Didn't run terrible in his 2 starts at Oaklawn, and could improve with a little bit of a different surface. And I'm going to use the 4. It probably will be a big price in tournaments, but yes, the 7 will definitely be an A horse and a horse that I'd be keying things around in multis and also in race stuff.
Lots of tournament action this weekend. We've got this new Saturday tournament right here at Keeneland, right here in Lexington at Keeneland. Of course, lots of action on DRF tournaments, including these new 2-stage Belmont qualifiers for the big Belmont contest. You going to be playing in that?
Yeah, I'm not only am I going to be playing, I'm going to tell everyone right now what I'm going to do. I'm going all in the second race in a double with the 2 horse, I can't remember the horse's name, to the 4 horse Limousine Liberal. I'm all in both entries. I'm doing the exact same thing, 250 double 2-4, 250 double 2-4. If I hit it, then we'll keep rolling. It's not going to pay much. They're going to both be favorites, but that'll be my start for the day. And so if you're watching along and that doesn't go well, then I'll be in the green room somewhere having adult beverages.
Babe Ruth, eat your heart out. Here's Jonathan Kinchin calling his shot in the conference room of Coolmore America here at lovely Ashford Stud. That is all the time we have for today. What a special show this was. Definitely one for the theoretical best of list that doesn't actually exist, but probably should. I want to thank Paul Matties, sort of wonderful little drop-in visit. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin. I want to thank all of you for listening. Today, I usually give the biggest thanks to all of you for listening. Today, we're going to give the biggest thanks to Scott Calder and Coolmore America for letting us come crash with them and enjoy just a gorgeous view here at a very special property, Coolmore America's Ashford Stud. Thank you guys so much. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. We will be back on Tuesday with a recap of everything that went down this weekend, and of course, more talk about the Kentucky Derby. May you win all your photos.